elected public officials, ladies and gentlemen. I recently read the transcript of a debate in the Senate and the contribution of one senator in particular who said, "The upshot of what we are saying here should be that every manufacturer in the state who knows what the duties that are to be charged against him by exporting his goods to Great Britain will shut down his factories, and probably that he will have to go across water and establish a factory on the other side for manufacturing. That gentleman should lay his case before the government, and I have no doubt it will be seriously considered." I'm sure you're all wondering how you missed that and which senator uttered it. Well, you didn't miss it, at least not recently anyway. It was in fact said by Senator Andrew Jemison, speaking in the Irish Senate in March 1923. The senator in question was the chairman of John Jemison and Company, who produced what is now the biggest selling brand of Irish whiskey and one of the world's fastest growing spirits brands. The debate in question related to the threat of new duties being imposed by the British government on the imports from that former colony, which was now the Irish Free State. Nearly a century later, here we are discussing the likely divergence of Britain and Ireland, new threats of tariffs, and maybe even state aid for affected companies. Who says history doesn't repeat itself? I'm here today as the director of ABFI, which is the Alcohol Beverage Federation of Ireland within IBEC. We represent brewers, distillers, and have trade associations that have existed 100 years, like the Irish Brewers Association, to the Irish Whisky Association, which we only just set up in 2014. We do so on an all-island basis, again, quite uniquely within IBEC, so we have members both north and south. And we operate across both jurisdictions. We are a small island, but one with a large and successful all-island drinks industry, which is steeped in a rich heritage. As such, I think we're a good sector to serve as an illustrative example to you all of the issues facing business in this new world order, and what is required and how we can adapt to ensure that business continues to thrive. Because consequently, if business is thriving, Ireland will continue to thrive in a post-Brexit world. Ireland is home, as you're all aware, to some of the world's most famous beers and ciders. We're also the historical home of whisky, and Irish whisky is currently the world's fastest growing spirits category, with the number of whisky distilleries having increased from just 4 in 2014 to 18 now, and another 23 in planning or development. Now, distilling is not for the faint-hearted. It costs at least 25 million to build your site, never mind laying product down and marketing and supports. So this represents a massive investment, particularly in rural Ireland. Irish cream liqueur remains one of Europe's largest spirits export categories. The largest brands in each of Irish whisky and Irish cream, Jameson and Baileys, are among the world's largest spirit brands. Irish gin and craft beers are growing rapidly, built on a nationwide network of microbreweries and distilleries which have sprung up in communities urban and rural, in every single county in fact. Irish whisky, Irish cream liqueur and poitín are all protected by EU and WTO-backed geographic indications. We export to 135 markets globally. Our drink exports in 2017 were worth 1.5 billion, up 8% in the previous year. We are major purchasers of Irish agricultural raw materials, including barley, cream and apples. We hosted 2.6 million visitors to our breweries and distilleries last year. So we buy locally, we sell globally, we create jobs, we attract tourists. We are proud of our contribution to Ireland's economy. But we are not complacent. The Irish drinks industry, while undergoing what many might consider a very perfect story of resurgence and success, also faces what many will accept as a perfect storm. Firstly, Brexit. The Irish drinks industry operates on an integrated all-island basis with seamless cross-border supply chains. Every day, 52 weeks in the year, malt, barley, apples and milk cross the border for production, as does Finnish whisky for blending or beer for bottling. Some of our distilleries in border counties have at any one time up to 40 goods or service suppliers on their books who are based on the other side of that border. The avoidance of a hard border, or indeed worse still a cliff edge no deal withdrawal by the UK, is our key concern. We want to avoid tariffs, particularly on raw material inputs such as apples, but also on packaging and glass. We want to avoid regulatory checks and delays at the border. We want to avoid disruptive changes to VAT and excise rules for cross-border trade. The Chequers Agreement gave us hope. Last week's amendments in the Commons diminished that hope. Post-Brexit, the three Irish spirits geographic indications for Irish whiskey and Irish cream and poitín. So these are the things that means that you can only make it on the island of Ireland, similarly to champagne and champagne. Here's an area that we most definitely need to avoid regulatory divergence. Once we go, and when Brexit occurs, we are going to be the only part of the EU that has geographic indications both inside and outside of the territory. Recently, I received a letter from UK Agricultural Minister George Eustace MP confirming the UK government's commitment to protect the all-island GIs by introducing a legal framework in the UK post-Brexit, and very importantly, to preserve Product of Ireland status for spirits produced in Northern Ireland. Whilst this is welcome, further concerns remain. We continue to call for commitments to protect all island GI spirits in future UK trade agreements. So it's not just good enough for them to agree what's there now, but also every trade deal they will do into the future, they need to write in our geographic indication protection. So Brexit certainly presents challenges for us. But as we've already been hearing this morning, in actual fact, the impending trade war with Trump could actually put us out of business in just 3 months' time. From 1995 until recently, we saw a continuing shift to zero tariffs in global spirits trade. Recently, the CETA deal with Canada eliminated the last tariffs on Irish cream liqueur and Irish gin. Late last year, China halved its remaining tariffs on Irish whiskey. All in all, with exceptionally strong leadership from the EU Commission through its ever-increasing programme of free trade agreements, a tariff-free global trading environment for spirits was becoming a reality. This is vital for our success. But how quickly things change. US whiskies have been hit with a 25% tariff by the EU in response to President Trump's protectionist policies. Fears of further retaliation are very real, as we've been hearing, particularly for the Irish whisky industry, who are heavily reliant on the US market. More than half of all of our exports of Irish whisky and Irish cream go to the US, and we are a price-sensitive product. So if you add 25% to the bottle of Jameson in the US, then you'll quickly feel people will substitute it to another category. So this is a very real and impending threat to our sector. We believe that now is the time when de-escalation is needed. The EU's lofty and still valid ambitions for global free trade must not be abandoned in a tit-for-tat trade war. The cost to Europe and Ireland will be much too high. And we do realise, whilst the need is to stay strong, at the same time we need to really realise the impact that this will have very quickly on a key part of Irish business. So when I meet with ministers, often they'll tell me Brexit, international trade, only so much we can do, limited input, and even the European Commission would say the same. But that's why it's more important than ever that government focuses on creating an environment and doing everything possible to make sure that any other barriers or barriers to trade are actually removed rather than increased here domestically. The third threat in our perfect storm is excessive regulation in Ireland. Of particular concern is that such proposed laws puts us at divergence from EU regulation at the very time when our government is keen to emphasise the importance of no regulatory divergence in the Brexit negotiations. Alcohol consumption in Ireland has dropped dramatically, down 25% since 2005, according to the World Health Organization. The latest EU ESPAD report showed a significant decline in underage alcohol consumption, with Ireland moving from 8th to 28th out of 33 countries analysed over the course of the study. Ireland already has some of the strictest codes on drinks advertising content and placement in the world. These positive trends and the introduction of the industry-backed codes didn't need draconian legislation in order to come about. But despite this, the government is proceeding with its public health alcohol bill, with its excessive and disproportionate provisions on advertising and labelling. Urban areas such as Dublin will become dark markets where nearly all outdoor advertising will be banned. This will stifle innovation, as it will make it very difficult to launch new products into the Irish market. Brewery and distillery visitor centres, bearing in mind the Guinness Storehouse alone attracts 1.7 million people. They will be required to remove directional signs at things like Lewis stops, the wayfinding pointing signs from streets, if they are within 200 metres of a creche, never mind a school. So we're asking again that the government would relook at this and think about it logically and think about what the ambitions are versus the reality of confused tourists wandering around Smithfield. Most worrying, the Irish government is proposing to require that all alcohol labels carry an unprecedented and inaccurate warning directly linking alcohol to fatal cancer. We support the idea of providing consumers with accurate information, but we do not support providing consumers with inaccurate and misleading information that causes confusion and at the same time damages business. The association between alcohol and cancer risk is complex and cannot be adequately explained in a single label. These Irish-only country labels will undermine the EU single market for goods and act as barriers to trade both in and out of Ireland. They will bring reputational damage to Ireland's food and drinks industry more broadly. And you can be sure that whilst we're starting with alcohol, it will quickly spread to the likes of red meat and processed foods, where equally there is a cancer-associated risk. Are we willing to throw Ireland's agri-food sector under the bus for the sake of less than clear-cut warnings that no other country in the world sees fit to introduce? Finally, excessive regulation in Ireland is combined with excessive taxation. Ireland's alcohol excise tax is the second highest in the European Union. We have the highest tax in wine, the second highest in beer, and the third highest on spirits. This excise tax unfairly penalises Irish businesses and Irish consumers. It puts 220,000 jobs, mainly in rural Ireland, at risk. It negatively impacts Ireland's attractiveness and competitiveness as a tourist destination, and it exposes Ireland to even more Brexit risk. ABFI, working with vintners, hoteliers, restaurateurs and the off-licence sector under the united banner of Digi, the Drinks Industry Group of Ireland, are calling for a cut in Ireland's penal excise rate in the forthcoming budget with our Support Your Local campaign. A reduction will contribute to overall cost competitiveness, which is essential for all business and particularly ours, and it is within our own domestic policy control. A reduction would particularly safeguard jobs by increasing the competitiveness of Ireland's tourism product. A reduction is also warranted for Irish consumers. It's a recessionary, heavy taxation requirement, which is now being repealed in other areas. The perfect storm is very consistent in its various elements. Divergence is the commonality. The divergence of Brexit, the divergence from the single market via country-only health warnings and excessive taxation, the divergence from free trade and the multilateral rule-based system. Now is not a time for divergence. Now is a time to double down on alignment. We need the closest possible EU-UK alignment post-Brexit. We need to copper fasten in the EU consolidated food and drink labelling that's consistent to the free market. We need for alignment to trump protectionism, to make trade work. IBEC, which my organisation ABFI forms part of, has been clear on these issues. We are leading in our new campaign on the future of Europe, where we have argued, in 50 years, Ireland has moved from being an inward-looking, protectionist economy to a highly competitive, innovative, globalised hub. EU membership has been central to this journey. Despite many challenges, the EU remains a model of global success. Now is not the time for a major change in direction. We must use the institutions we have to effectively deliver a better, more prosperous future for all our citizens. We need more cooperation in areas where there is a clear collective benefit. In looking to a successful future, there is one final element which is badly needed, and that's rational and inclusive debate. And that's why I think things like the MacGill Summer School are so important. Despite all the talk of new politics in Ireland, we're now living in a time where more and more people feel that they have a right to be heard and that others do not. And that to me is unacceptable. For example, in my own sector, when speaking on behalf of an NGO or a health profession, it's viewed as a virtue. Yet when you speak up on behalf of business, which sustains Irish jobs and buys from Irish farmers, it's a vice. This is the reality that we have experienced, and it is an unhealthy part of democracy. Business groups such as ABFI and IBEC are labelled lobbyists, which is portrayed as bad, while NGO and public health professionals are advocates, who are the good guys. For a number of years, the logic of this approach resulted in the World Health Organization refusing to engage with the drinks industry. They have now changed tack and are embracing dialogue. Political discourse and policy making in Ireland would be much richer if such an inclusive approach was adopted here. It is now time that our own Department of Health followed the WHO lead and that it opens up to genuine consultation and engagement with key stakeholders on all areas within its remit. This is how we will achieve real accountability and indeed progress. Alignment and inclusion. Now is the time to come together, to stick together, not to fall apart. Maybe we can't stop things falling apart. The perfect storm might not change course. The history of Senator John Andrew Jameson in 1923 might well become the repeated reality of the near future. We did have a lost century for Irish whiskey. We are now burgeoning, being the fastest growing spirits category in the world. But as Heaney told us, it's not just history that can rhyme, but so can hope. In tumultuous times, we must at least hope for the best, and I certainly do. Gur míle maith.